At 4:30 p.m. on March 30th, 2002, Israeli military forces took over Palestinian TV stations when they occupied Ramallah in the West Bank. Shortly after occupying the Al Watan TV station, the Israeli forces began broadcasting pornography over its transmitter. The Palestinians were outraged and bewildered. Why in the world, one woman wondered, should one do such a thing? The answer is simple. The Israelis broadcast pornography because pornography is a weapon in the arsenal of psychological warfare. Libertarians tell us that sexual freedom goes hand in hand with freedom of speech, and that the issue of pornographic images is intrinsically linked to the issue of freedom of speech. But in reality, pornography is a form of control. Pornography has nothing to do with freedom. Pornography is a weapon because, as St. Thomas Aquinas pointed out, lust darkens the mind. Lust makes you blind. A blind opponent is easily defeated. Pornography is the weaponization of lust. The best symbol of the military use of lust is Samson and Delilah. After Samson's reason lost control of his passions, he ended up, in Milton's words, eyeless in Gaza, grinding at the mill with slaves. The Israelis unleashed the same weapon at the same place 3,000 years later because they wanted to make the Palestinians eyeless in Gaza as well. The Israelis wanted to enslave the Palestinians. They did not want to liberate them. St. Augustine brought the biblical story of Samson up to date in his day shortly after the fall of the Roman Empire when he wrote, "It is clear that sin is the primary cause of servitude." That means, he continued in another passage from the same book, that a good man, though a slave, is free, but a wicked man, though a king, is a slave. For he serves not one man alone, but what is worse, as many masters as he has vices. Man was free as long as he was moral, which is to say, as long as he acted according to the dictates of practical reason. Man is not free to be irrational. Man can use his freedom to give in to passion, but at that point he becomes a slave. Pornography was part of Roman culture, as the mosaics in the whorehouses of Pompeii made clear. After the fall of Rome, pornography disappeared because Christian Europe based its culture on Augustine's principle that a man has as many masters as he has vices. 1,300 years later, 1,300 years after the fall of Rome, the world got turned upside down. The word for that change is revolution. Pornography re-entered Western culture as a weapon in the 18th century. I'm referring to the illustrated versions of the Marquis de Sade's pornographic opus Justine, which appeared at the Palais Royal before the French Revolution and were instrumental in bringing about that revolution as well. The Marquis de Sade is simply Augustine turned upside down. He understood that in order to create a revolution, you have to subvert the morals of the people first. To bring this about, the Marquis de Sade proposed exhibiting women naked in the theaters. This created a problem because in a big theater, it's difficult to see the women, but in a small theater where the women are visible, the crowd is small. Technology solved that problem. Pornography is always a function of technology. What followed was 200 years of more and more refined methods of control based on more and more advanced technology. One major technological breakthrough was the motion picture, an invention which created a cultural civil war between America's three main ethnic groups, Protestants, Catholics, and Jews, during the 1920s. Hollywood was a Jewish creation, and within a decade of its founding, the Jews, like the Israelis who invaded Ramallah, were using the motion picture industry as a weapon against the people of the United States of America, who were outraged at their promotion of obscenity and demanded that the government take action. When the Protestants under Will Hayes failed to rein in Jewish obscenity, the Catholics instituted a boycott, which threatened to bankrupt Hollywood, and the Jews backed down and instituted the Production Code in 1934. In 1947, pornography was weaponized again when the United States scrapped the Morgenthau Plan to starve the conquered German people to death and put the Marshall Plan in its place to restore Germany as a bulwark against Soviet communism. That meant pumping money into the economy, and to ensure that the Germans had something to buy, the Allies imported 150 tons of obscene material into Germany. Pornography was weaponized once again, this time to destroy the moral fiber of the German people, which was the Jewish way to ensure that there was no resurgence of National Socialism. The Catholic Church mounted a campaign against what they called Schmutz und Schund, filth and smut, but it was no match for that country's illustrated magazines, all of which had to get a license from a Jewish psychiatrist by the name of David Mordecai Levy. For 31 years, the Catholics protected the American people against the weaponization of human sexuality. But in 1965, in the wake of the Second Vatican Council, the Catholics lost their nerves and the Jews broke the code with their Holocaust porn film, The Pawnbroker. Within 7 years, hardcore pornography, Deep Throat, The Devil and Miss Jones, and Behind the Green Door was being shown in first-run movie houses. In 1978, Jimmy Carter appointed Paul Volcker as head of the Federal Reserve System as a way of placating the creditor class, which felt that inflation had gotten out of control. Volcker's cure for inflation was raising interest rates to unheard levels, and by 1980, T-bills were paying 20% interest. In order to lend money at these rates, banks had to persuade legislators to abolish usury laws. The result was the collapse of America's manufacturing base, low wages, and the rise of vulture capitalism. As Andrew Joyce pointed out in the UNS review, vulture capitalism is Jewish capitalism. The rise in vulture capitalism was closely paralleled by the rise of pornography. Both phenomena are Jewish. The enormous amount of money which ended up in the hands of the usurers was used to fund think tanks, nonprofit corporations, and NGOs, which then promoted sexual liberation, which during this period of time meant the promotion of sodomy and pornography to distract men who should have been forming families from their economic misery. The best example of this confluence of Jewish money and ideas is the Cato Institute, which was founded in 1977 by Charles Koch and Murray Rothbard. When pornographer John Staliano, who is also, along with the Koch brothers, a major contributor to the Cato Institute, when Staliano was charged with producing obscene material in 2010, the Cato Institute rushed to his defense. During the 1980s, the Cato Institute promoted the simultaneous decriminalization of usury and pornography. The ultimate result of this moral deregulation was massive student loan debt and massive addiction to pornography. In 1986, the Mies Commission made significant inroads in trying to stop pornography, but government could not keep up with the combination of technological innovation and libertarian ideology, which used free speech to justify pornography. In 1989, Reuben Sturman ended up going to jail after setting up a series of pornographic film houses, but the film loop he pioneered became obsolete with the invention of the VCR, and VHS tapes became obsolete with the opening of the internet. At that point, Hollywood produced two pro-porn propaganda films, Boogie Nights and The People versus Larry Flynt, and the government, under the direction of Bill Clinton, a man who had difficulty controlling his passions, passed the misnamed Communications Decency Act, which eventually effectively ended government efforts to prosecute obscenity. Contrary to the freedom which Larry Flynt and the libertarians promised, the result of the de facto decriminalization of pornography was, as St. Augustine could have predicted, an exponential increase in addiction, which is the modern term for slavery to sin. Predictably, the media outlets under oligarchic control said that addiction to pornography was a myth. Reporting on fascinating, rigorous new research, Psychology Today announced that there is no scientific evidence to support the claim that sex addiction is real. That claim flies in the face of the fact that a Google search of the terms porn and addiction yields 67 million results. In November 2019, the young men who were the main victims of this campaign of covert psychological warfare announced a boycott of pornography and the masturbation, which was its inevitable companion, in something they called No Nut November. The reaction of the oligarchs who created sexual revolution to distract this cohort from the fact that they were hopelessly enslaved to their own passions and student loan debt was swift in coming when Rolling Stone magazine denounced anyone who objected to pornography as anti-Semitic. If the libertarians are interested in promoting freedom, why are they promoting pornography? Everyone now knows that pornography leads to addiction, but we now also know that nobody pays for it, eliminating the business angle. So porn isn't really about money either. It's about control. The libertarians who loudly proclaim their support of freedom are really interested in promoting addiction, because addiction is a form of control which is congenial to the oligarchs who fund think tanks like the Cato Institute to distract the gullible from the fact that they are hopelessly in debt. The moral is clear. Anyone who defends pornography is either what Lenin called a useful idiot or what I call a cokesucker, which is to say a conservative agent of the oligarchs like Charlie Kirk, whose mission is to control and destroy the very people he claims to liberate. We now know that sexual liberation is a form of control. Consciousness is not reversible. Logos is rising. We now have empirical proof that St. Augustine was right when he pointed out that a man has as many masters as he has vices.